You know what's dangerous? A woman who stops shrinking herself to fit into the box society gave her. A man who refuses to be average when the world keeps telling him to settle. And you, when you finally stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20 and decide to become the best damn version of yourself. Let me tell you something powerful. Becoming your best self isn't a luxury. It's your responsibility. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real ones. Raw, unfiltered, evolving. And if you're ready, if you're done playing small, then buckle up. This next 15 minutes might just change how you see yourself forever. Stop apologizing for who you are. That's the first step to freedom. Too often, we walk into rooms and shrink. Not because we are small, but because we've been conditioned to believe that confidence is arrogance, that strength is intimidation, that ambition is unattractive. But let me ask you, how long will you keep apologizing for breathing fire when the world keeps handing you smoke? You're not too loud. You've just been surrounded by people who've forgotten how to listen. You're not too emotional. You simply feel deeply in a world that praises indifference. You're not too ambitious. You just dream beyond the ceiling others settled for. And yet, every day, people apologize for their passion, their personality, their presence, just to make others comfortable. And in that act, you bury parts of yourself, thinking that's what maturity looks like. But suppression is not strength. Dimming your light so others don't feel blind is not humility, it's self-abandonment. A girl who wanted to sing at the school talent show, but after being told her voice was too sharp, she never sang in public again. She spends her adult life humming tunes in private, with a voice that still had magic, but she believed she wasn't good enough. Or the boy who loved to dance but was called girly, so he stuffed his joy deep into silence. What if that voice could have become the next star? What if those moves could have inspired millions? But we'll never know because they spent their lives apologizing for their truth. You owe no apology for the things that make you different. The world does not need more copies. It needs originals. Think about this. If Oprah had apologized for being too opinionated, or if Priyanka Chopra had apologized for breaking into Hollywood as a brown woman in a white world, where would inspiration live? Greatness is never born from apology. It's born from unapologetic ownership of who you are. In your daily life, how many times have you said sorry when you actually meant thank you? Sorry I'm late instead of thank you for waiting. Sorry I'm emotional instead of thank you for holding space for my feelings. We are taught to constantly shrink, to be digestible, to tone it down. Why? Because powerful presence intimidates fragile egos. But that's not your burden to carry. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to laugh loud, cry hard, dream big, and live fully. You're allowed to say, "This is who I am," without asking anyone for permission. Think of that colleague who always voices her opinions in meetings, and they label her difficult. But guess what? That same woman is the one who climbs the ladder while others remain afraid to be heard. Think of the mother who chose to leave a toxic marriage and rebuild her life alone with her kids. Society judged her, but she never apologized, and now she stands as a symbol of strength to her daughters, teaching them that survival isn't shameful, it's sacred. You don't need to explain your worth. It doesn't need a presentation. Your energy is your signature. Stop editing your spirit just so someone else can understand it. Not everyone is meant to, and that's okay. Real ones won't be threatened by your truth. They'll celebrate it. You weren't born to be liked by everyone. You were born to be loved by the right ones. The ones who don't ask you to apologize for your brilliance, your chaos, your fire. You don't need to say sorry for wanting more, needing peace, demanding respect, or choosing yourself. Stop apologizing for being exactly who you are. Because your authenticity is your superpower. Say no without guilt. Because every time you say yes to things that drain you, you say no to yourself. And one of the most courageous acts of self-love is setting boundaries without needing to justify them. In a world that glorifies people-pleasing, silence often feels safer than self-respect. But silence doesn't protect your peace. It destroys it, slowly. You were not born to be a doormat in someone else's journey. You were born to walk your own, with pride, with purpose, with power. Look around. We've been trained from childhood to prioritize politeness over our own feelings. When someone asks you to do something, and every part of you screams, "I don't want to," but you still smile and say, "Sure," that's not kindness. That's fear disguised as obedience. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being labeled selfish. Fear of losing validation. But here's the truth. Saying yes when your soul says no is the slowest kind of self-sabotage. Imagine the woman who gets off her 9-to-5 shift, completely exhausted. Her body aches, her mind is spinning, but a friend calls, asking for help moving furniture that weekend. She wants to say no. She has errands, she has rest to catch up on. But instead, she says yes. Not out of love, out of guilt. She drags herself to help, runs herself to the ground, and no one even notices the cost. She's praised for being reliable, but inside, she's breaking. You see, no one claps for your burnout. No one rewards your quiet suffering. The only one who pays the price is you. Think of the man who keeps working overtime because he doesn't want to disappoint his boss. He misses dinners, family time, self-care, all because he couldn't say no to one more task. He believes it's what makes him valuable. But one day, when he finally collapses from stress or burnout, they'll replace him in a week. That's the harsh truth of life. Your boundaries are your job to protect. No one else will do it for you. Or consider the young girl who keeps attending events she dreads, going out with people who exhaust her, just so she's not called boring or antisocial. She laughs when she doesn't feel like laughing. She shows up when her heart's not in it. And slowly, piece by piece, she loses the real version of herself. All for temporary acceptance from people who wouldn't notice her absence if she vanished. You don't owe your time to anyone who doesn't honor your truth. Saying no is not rejection, it's redirection. When you say no to chaos, you say yes to clarity. When you say no to toxicity, you say yes to healing. When you say no to toxicity, you say yes to healing. When you say no to pleasing others at your own expense, you say yes to growth. You deserve to rest without apologizing. You deserve to decline without over-explaining. You deserve to honor your needs without dressing them up as favors. The power of no is magnetic. The person who knows their limits commands respect. They walk into rooms with grace, not guilt. They choose their peace over people's perception. They choose long-term well-being over short-term approval. And you know what's wild? The more you say no to what doesn't serve you, the more your life aligns with what does. You create space for real connections, real purpose, real joy. The next time someone asks you to do something and your gut says no, honor that voice. The next time you feel obligated to attend, assist, perform, explain, bend, ask yourself, is this costing me my peace? Because if it is, it's too expensive. Your peace is not for sale. Your energy is not a public buffet. You don't owe anyone constant access to you. And most importantly, your worth does not increase by how much of yourself you give away. Rewrite the narrative, because the story you've been told isn't the story you have to live. You are not the broken chapters others forced upon you, nor the label they threw on you in passing. You are the author, the editor, the publisher. And if you don't like the script, you have every right to change the plot. Just because you were cast as the weak one, the quiet one, the backup plan, the almost, doesn't mean that's who you have to remain. You get to rise from that. Think about the student who failed her math exam once, and from that moment on, every teacher said she wasn't math-minded, so she stopped trying. She believed them. She let that one grade become her identity. But what if someone had told her that failure is feedback, not a final sentence? What if she had rewritten the narrative to say, I learned differently, and that's okay? She might have become a scientist, an engineer, a coder, but instead, she carried someone else's words as her truth. Words are powerful, but your belief in them is even more powerful. Zeh. And I'm going to think of the boy who was always told he was too sensitive. Every time he cried, he heard, man up. Every time he felt deeply, they mocked him. So he stopped feeling. He buried his emotions. And now, as a man, he struggles to love, to express, to connect. Not because he's cold, but because he was taught that warmth is weakness. But the truth is, sensitivity is strength. Empathy is leadership. But the truth is, sensitivity is strength. Empathy is leadership. The narrative he inherited was false. And until he rewrites it, he'll keep living inside a lie that was never his to begin with. There's a woman out there who grew up being told she wasn't beautiful. Maybe it was a comment about her weight, her skin, her height. And maybe it wasn't even said with cruelty, but it stuck. Room, thinking she has to prove her worth because someone once made her feel invisible. But beauty isn't what the mirror reflects. It's what your energy radiates. She was never lacking beauty. She was just surrounded by people who couldn't see it. Rewrite the narrative. She was never ugly. They were just blind. Then there's the man who came from a family where no one ever went to college. He grows up thinking success isn't for people like him. He doesn't even apply. Because in his mind, doors like that don't open for people like him. But what if he rewrote the story? What if he dared to believe, I may be the first, but I won't be the last? That one shift could change an entire generation. Legacy begins when one person dares to believe a new story is possible. Or consider the mother who left an abusive relationship. People whispered behind her back, judged her strength, questioned her choices. They wrote her narrative as damaged goods, as too difficult to love. But what if she rewrote the story as survivor, not victim, as healer, not broken, as warrior, not weak? Her scars aren't shame. They're proof she fought battles and lived to tell them. Her story is not over. It's just getting powerful. You see, narratives are often written for us before we can speak for ourselves, by society, by culture, by fear. But the moment you realize you hold the pen, everything changes. You stop living inside someone else's version of you. You stop trying to fit into a mold that wasn't built for your fire. You stop walking a path that's lined with shoulds and start chasing the musts, the things your soul burns for, the things that feel like home, the things that finally make your life feel like it belongs to you. Heal, then build. Because anything constructed on a wounded foundation will eventually collapse under its own weight. You cannot pour cement over pain and call it strength. You cannot decorate dysfunction and pretend it's peace. Healing is not a delay in the journey. It is the preparation for what's to come. Too many people are rushing to build careers, relationships, families, all while bleeding silently from wounds they never dared to clean. But unhealed wounds leak into every corner of your life, staining even the purest intentions. You don't get to skip healing if you want something that lasts. Picture a woman who jumps from one relationship to another because she can't stand being alone. She calls it moving on. But what she's really doing is escaping the silence. She thinks a new man will silence the echoes of the old one. But you can't bury your pain in someone else's arms and expect it to disappear. You can't build intimacy without trust. And you can't build trust when your heart is still carrying betrayal like a shadow. Healing doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to clean the wound before it infects the entire soul. Think of the man who grew up with a father who never told him, "I'm proud of you." Every accomplishment felt empty. Every goal felt like a desperate cry for approval. He becomes successful on paper, the job, the house, the car, but inside he's still that boy trying to earn love he never received. And so he never feels good enough. Why? Because no amount of achievement can heal the wounds of neglect. You can't build confidence on a foundation of insecurity. Until you face the ache, you'll always chase validation in places that will never satisfy. There's a young girl who was bullied in school, called ugly, awkward, unwanted. So she grows up thinking her value is in how well she performs for others. She becomes a perfectionist, a people pleaser, always saying yes, never standing up for herself, terrified of rejection. But you can't build self-worth from the approval of people who don't even know your name. She doesn't need applause. She needs to go back to that version of herself and tell her, you were always enough, even when they couldn't see it. Healing isn't forgetting the past, it's reclaiming your power from it. Now imagine someone building a business, driven not by passion but by revenge. "I'll show them," they whisper, as if proving others wrong is the same as finding purpose. But what happens when the applause dies down? What happens when the them they were trying to impress stops watching? They're left with a life that looks successful but feels empty. You can't build joy on the ruins of bitterness. Healing means you no longer build from pain, you build from peace, clarity, and alignment. And then there's the friend who's always the fixer, the one everyone leans on, the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left. She's praised for her strength, but inside she's drowning. She never asks for help, because once when she did, no one showed up. So now she wears strength like armor, but underneath she's exhausted. She builds walls instead of bridges. But healing would mean letting someone in again, trusting, receiving, resting. Because real strength is knowing when to stop surviving and start thriving. You don't always have to hold the world. Sometimes you just have to hold yourself. Healing isn't a trend, it's a commitment. A radical act of love. It's the decision to stop reliving your trauma through your choices, to stop projecting old pain onto new opportunities, to stop blaming the world for what you refuse to face. When you heal, you don't just feel better, you become better, more intentional, more whole, more powerful. Because now, you're not building to prove anything. You're building because you are finally free to create something that reflects your truth. And transport your truth once again. Because who you surround yourself with will either elevate you or drain you. The company you keep is either feeding your purpose or feeding your distractions. You become like the voices you listen to, the minds you engage with, and the energy you allow near you. If you're always the strongest, most ambitious, most visionary person in your group, it's time to question if you're growing or babysitting. Real growth demands that you outgrow people who are comfortable being stuck. It demands that you love people from a distance while choosing to walk with those who light your path, not block it. Think of the woman who's finally starting her own business. She's got ideas, fire, and drive, but her friends laugh when she talks about her dreams. They say things like, be realistic, or that's not for people like us. Slowly, without realizing it, she starts to second-guess herself. She stops posting her work. She shrinks her vision. Why? Because her environment didn't water her. It choked her. You cannot grow in soil that was never meant to nourish you. Your circle is either your greenhouse or your graveyard. Now picture the man who just started focusing on fitness, health, and mental wellness. But every time he skips a night out to train or read, his friends mock him, call him boring, too serious, or say you've changed. Of course he's changed. That's what growth looks like. But instead of encouragement, he gets resistance. Not because he's doing something wrong, but because he's doing something they're too scared to try. When your growth becomes uncomfortable for others, it reveals who was really rooting for you and who was just clapping until you outgrew them. So, I would like to invite you on this journey to see another path of freedom. To see another path of freedom. To ask yourself this question until you are comfortable with it. Who's really rooting for you? And who are you rooting for? And call him to ask him. Because you feel more powerful when you are. There's so much beauty around you. Then there's the creative soul. The painter, the writer, the dreamer. Every time she shares her vision, her circle tells her to get a real job. They say her dream is impractical, that art won't pay the bills. So she buries her talent, suffocates her gift, and lives in a box someone else built for her. But when she meets a new group of creatives, people who believe in expression, vision, discipline, she flourishes. Because sometimes it's not your talent that's lacking, it's your surroundings that are toxic to it. And how about the person trying to heal, to become emotionally intelligent, to set boundaries? They begin therapy, read books, start journaling, but their circle makes fun of it. They say things like, you're too soft, or stop overthinking everything. That kind of circle doesn't challenge you. Healing is hard enough without being surrounded by people who are allergic to growth. If your circle doesn't make space for your evolution, you owe it to yourself to find one that does. There's also the silent achiever. The one in your friend group who never shares their goals because every time they do, it's met with sarcasm, envy, or passive-aggressive comments. That's not friendship. That's disguised competition. A real circle will clap when you win, not shrink the room to feel taller. A real circle will speak your name in rooms full of opportunity, A real circle isn't threatened by your shine.